Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into a book that, well, it really left a mark on me.
Oh.
The Women, it's called, by Kristin Hannah.
Okay, yeah. I've heard of that one.
Have you read it?
I haven't yet, no, but it's on my list.
You've got to bump it up. Seriously.
Yeah.
It's set during the Vietnam War,
Mm-hmm.
but it's from the perspective of the nurses.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. I don't think I've
Yeah.
read anything like that before.
Me neither. And it really makes you think about the war in a whole new way.
Yeah.
All the historical stuff, the emotional intensity.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what is it about the story that really,
Well, for me, it was Hannah's ability to bring these women's stories to life. You're not just reading about battles and stuff, you're right there with them, feeling their fear, their hope.
it's like you're experiencing the war through their eyes.
Exactly. We all know Vietnam was a major turning point, right? But this book made me realize how much of what we hear is from the men's side.
That makes sense. It's
Yeah.
like we're only getting half the story.
Right. And Hannah doesn't hold back. Like the main character, Frankie, starts out pretty naive. She thinks she's going to be like some Florence Nightingale figure saving lives and all.
Oh, I see.
But Vietnam, well, it hits her hard with a heavy dose of reality.
I bet. I can only imagine what those nurses went through.
Remember that scene where she first arrives at the base? The heat, the chaos. You're right there with her feeling totally overwhelmed.
Wow, she really puts you right in the middle of it, huh?
It's intense. Even the way Frankie describes the smells, like antiseptic, mixed with something almost metallic. It's crazy.
It's not just the sights and sounds then. It's like this whole other level of immersion.
Exactly.
Oh.
And speaking of immersion, let's talk about Frankie's friendships with the other nurses, especially Barb and Ethel.
Okay, yeah. Their relationships.
They are something else, right? They're so loyal to each other. But there's also this, I don't know, like an undercurrent of competition,
That's interesting.
almost a jealousy, as they're dealing with all the trauma and pressure of the war.
Wow. So their bond, is it like a love-hate kind of thing?
Yeah, kinda. But that's what makes it feel real. They bicker, they get on each other's nerves, but in the end, they always have each other's backs.
So it's like a raw, honest portrayal of female friendship under extreme circumstances.
Exactly. I mean, wouldn't you think that kind of intensity, that need for connection, would be amplified in a situation like that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Being constantly surrounded by death and suffering, I mean, that's got to change you.
Right. And then you've got the whole romance aspect, too. Frankie's drawn to the surgeon, Janie. Super charismatic guy, but
Oh.
he's married.
Oh. Okay, that's complicated.
It is. And it shows Frankie's internal struggle. Trying to do the right thing, but also dealing with these intense feelings,
Uh-huh.
all while the threat of death is looming over everything.
I see. It's like that whole war is glamorous idea gets completely shattered.
Right. You see her trying to figure out what's right and wrong when the lines are all blurred.
I imagine it makes you question her motives a bit, too. Is she really attracted to him or just looking for comfort in all the chaos?
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, who wouldn't be looking for some kind of escape?
Mm.
But then, just when you think it can't get more complicated, enter Rye Walsh.
Raya Walsh.
Yeah, he was a friend of her brother's, someone she met at a party before her brother shipped out.
Okay. So how does he fit into all of this?
Well, their encounter in Vietnam, it's not exactly a casual reunion. Hannah writes it in a way that makes you think there's something more there, something deeper than just friendship.
Ooh, intriguing. I see where this is going.
And that's all we'll say about that for now. But trust me, the way Rye is introduced, it's like a match hitting a powder keg. Things are about to get very interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how it all unfolds.
So we've got Frankie in this love triangle, kinda, drawn to Jamie, but he's married. And then there's Rye, who's bringing up all these old feelings.
And let's not forget, all of this is happening while she's trying to stay alive in a war zone.
Right, it's like a pressure cooker.
Totally. And that's where Hannah's writing really shines. She captures the intensity of what's going on inside Frankie
Yeah.
alongside all the chaos of the war.
It's like these two forces are constantly pushing and pulling her.
Exactly.
One thing that really stuck with me is how the book shows the less glamorous side of being a nurse.
Yeah, it's not all about bandaging wounds and comforting soldiers.
Right, like remember that scene with the mass casualty event?
Damascal.
Yeah. The way Hannah describes it, it's just, it's brutal.
Oh, yeah.
The blood, the sheer number of patients, everyone's scrambling to save lives. It's intense.
It's like a punch to the gut.
And Frankie, she's got to make these split-second decisions right in the middle of it all.
Decisions that could mean life or death.
Right. And you really see her struggling to reconcile what she learned in school with, with the reality of what's in front of her.
It's a trial by fire, in every sense of the word.
And what's interesting is that Hannah uses those situations, those really intense moments, to show Frankie's vulnerability, too.
Yeah, we see her doubts, her fears.
It makes her feel so real,
They're really human.
Like she's not some kind of superhero. She's just a young woman doing her best in a crazy situation.
And that makes her triumphs feel even more earned.
Exactly. And then just when you think she's finding some kind of rhythm, some sense of control in all the chaos, boom,
What happens?
she gets transferred to Pleiku.
Ah, Pleiku. That's a turning point for sure.
Talk about a whole different level of intense.
It's like stepping into a whole other war.
Right.
More remote, more isolated, under constant threat of attack.
It just strips away any illusions Frankie might have had,
Yeah.
about the war.
Yeah.
And it's not just the danger. There's this feeling of being completely cut off from everything familiar.
Isolated.
Yeah. And the letters she exchanges with her parents,
What about them?
they just highlight that disconnect.
Between her and her family.
Yeah. Like they're living in this world where the war is just a news story, while she's facing the horrors of it every single day.
It's a powerful contrast for sure.
And those letters, they're not just about family stuff either. They show this growing divide in America.
Oh, interesting.
People's attitudes toward the war are changing, and those at home are struggling to understand what soldiers and nurses are going through.
Yeah. It makes you think about how you'd even begin to explain something like that.
How do you bridge that gap between what they're seeing on the news and what it's really like to be there?
It's a question that haunts Frankie throughout the book.
And it's something a lot of veterans dealt with when they came home.
Absolutely. That sense of isolation, of not being understood, it becomes another battle they have to fight.
It's heavy stuff. But it's also what makes The Women more than just a war story. It's about the human cost, the scars that go way deeper than any physical injury.
And just when you think Frankie's starting to find her way to deal with that isolation, well, fate throws her another curveball.
You're talking about Rye.
Yeah, Rye Walsh, the pilot who, reawakens something in her.
He goes missing in action.
Missing in action, just like that.
That scene where Frankie gets the news, man, it's like the air gets sucked out of the room. You can just feel the weight of her grief.
It's a gut punch for sure. And it forces Frankie to ask herself a question that's been there all along, really.
What happens when the one person who really gets you, who sees you for who you are, is suddenly gone?
And that's where we're left hanging, wondering if this is the end for them or if there's still a chance. But that's a conversation for our final part.
So we lose off with Frankie just, devastated. Rye's gone missing. It's just one thing after another.
It's a lot for one person to carry, and you really feel that weight in Hannah's writing, that grief, that sense of loss. It's just heartbreaking.
It is. And what's so amazing is how Frankie comes back from it.
Yeah.
Not in some, predictable way, but she comes back.
She doesn't just snap out of it. It's a process.
Exactly. It's a fight. And then she decides to come home. You'd think that would be the happy ending, right?
You'd think so, but it's not that simple.
Not at all. It turns out going home comes with its own set of challenges.
Like what?
Well, her family, they don't really know how to deal with what she's been through. It's like they want to pretend the war never happened.
Oh, wow. That's tough.
It is. And it really shows this disconnect, between those who experienced the war and those who didn't.
Like they're living in two different worlds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Frankie, she's changed. She doesn't fit in anymore. Not with her family, not in her hometown.
She's come back to a world that's moved on without her.
Right. And she's carrying all this pain, all this baggage that no one seems to understand.
Yeah.
So what does she do? She seeks out other veterans.
People who get it.
Yeah. She ends up spending a lot of time at the VA hospital.
A place where she can finally be herself.
Yeah. And it's there, connecting with other women who've seen the same darkness,
Yeah.
that she starts to heal. It's not a quick fix or anything, but it's a start. And then just when you think she's finally finding her footing,
Hannah throws in another twist. I bet I can guess this one.
Rye comes back.
Knew it.
It's the moment you've been waiting for, but it's not all sunshine and roses,
Of course not. There's a lot to unpack there.
So much. The trauma, the guilt, all the unanswered questions. Can they really pick up where they left off after everything that's happened?
It's a question that hangs over their entire reunion.
And Hannah doesn't give you any easy answers. She makes you work for it, makes you think about the nature of resilience. It's not just about surviving the initial trauma. It's about dealing with all the aftershocks.
The way that experience just ripples out, affecting everything.
Exactly. But in the end, Frankie and Rye, they find their way back to each other. It's not a fairy tale ending, but it feels real, earned.
There is a sense of hope there. That even after the darkest times, love and connection can still find a way.
And that hope, it extends beyond Frankie and Rye. The book ends with her joining a protest against the war.
Oh, wow. Powerful.
It is. She's reclaiming her voice, standing up for what she believes in, refusing to be silenced. And it reminds you that the fight for healing and for justice, it doesn't end when the war is over.
The women, it sounds like it really makes you think about the lasting impact of war, not just on those who fought, but on everyone.
It does, and I think that's the mark of a great book, when it stays with you, when it sparks these kinds of conversations about history, about humanity, about the power of hope.
It reminds us that behind every headline, every statistic, there are real people, real stories.
And those stories, they deserve to be heard. So that wraps up our deep dive into The Women.
A powerful book by the sounds of it.
It is. If you're looking for a read that'll challenge you, move you, and stay with you long after you finished it, I highly recommend checking this one out.
And maybe it'll inspire you to do some deep dives of your own.